Tourette's podcast is not a medical advice show. It's a show about experiences. In the course of that, we may talk about medications or therapies or stories from the doctor's office, but don't mistake any of that for medical advice or direction. It's not. Get that only from people or places licensed or certified to give it, not from a massively fun and action-packed podcast about our life experiences.
Hi everyone, I'm Brittany Wolf.
And I'm Jhonelle. And today we're going to chat about some of the weird things that we think about what our tics do, how they affect us. It's just a very interesting condition. So we'll get into some of that.
Yes, sounds good to me. So just as a reminder for everyone too, as you might have heard in the first episode, Jhonelle and I will be now your hosts of this lovely podcast.
Yes.
Hopefully we can get Ben back every once in a while so you guys can get him back and hear his perspective and stuff. This is still going to be a guest-led podcast for the most part.
Right.
But every once in a while, you might just hear Jhonelle and I talking about topics back and forth. We have some ideas in mind. So we thought we'd just kick it off that way today. So before we started recording, we were talking about a topic that I got on the subject of earlier today where my tics, or where tics in general can... I want to be very cautious about using the word contagious because people make those really cool jokes about, oh, is it contagious? I actually just recorded a video about that today.
Oh, nice.
And so Tourette syndrome is not contagious. However, as Jhonelle, you know, our tics we can pick them up if we're around other people with Tourette syndrome. And I was explaining it today, and I don't know if you experience this as well on top of picking up people's tics. I can pick up things as tics, like body movements and stuff like that. If people move their eyes a lot, I can pick it up, or it triggers my tics to start, like my facial tics. Sometimes Scott and I, my husband, for those that don't know, when we're watching TV, there will be people that have very animated faces, and I literally have to be like, oh my gosh, you have to let me know when they're off the screen because I can't watch it. I feel like the pressure start behind my eyebrows, and it's one of the things that I get.
The fancy name for that is called echopraxia, where you pick up tics where you're copying other people's movements, or echolalia, where you pick up tics where you're copying other people's words or sounds.
Yeah. And it's something that definitely happens with me. And
Same.
it's one of the things that I get nervous about more with my tics because I'm afraid when it happens like in person during a conversation, people are going to think that I'm mocking them.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Absolutely. I dealt with that yesterday where I was talking with a friend. She was, going through a hard time. So she's like pouring her heart out. And she made a movement with her hands, kind of just like, oh. And my tic also did that. And I just felt bad. And I just put my hand up and shook my head kind of to tell her no, like that wasn't intentional. And it's just like a general movement. But I'm like, please do not think that this is me mocking you. I don't know why at this point my body decided to tick like that because it's not a typical tic that I have.
Right.
But it just did.
Yeah. I do it too when so Sam Comroe, as we both know and love, the comedian, who's amazing, by the way. Anybody listening should definitely go check him out. He has Tourette syndrome. He's on AGT, so America's Got Talent.
Yeah.
Whenever he has kind of like a chest movement that he does, and I pick it up every time I'm at one of his shows, and I've been to a lot of them because I go to see him every time he's near. We're going to see him again next month, and I'm so excited.
Nice. That'll be fun.
I will do that like during the whole show, and I'll keep doing it like the whole night. And normally I don't have any kind of movements, not like that. Like it's almost like my body's like, all right, we have to be like in sync with this person that's also ticking. And and it's funny too because at least at the one show, the most recent show that I went to last summer, he asked if anybody in the room had Tourette syndrome. And of course, like I cheered and a couple other people did too. And he's like, I need you all to get out.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I chose to sat in the front row.
Yeah.
When I went to his show. So
me too. I always do.
Yeah.
So
I remember I met him like afterwards. He kind of waits, and I had said hello. And I was like, I'm sorry if I like triggered any of your tics or anything. And he's like, oh, I saw you. I was just trying to avoid eye contact because it's something that I feel like in that sense, you're talking about quote unquote contagious. It's not necessarily contagious, but I feel like if you're around, especially if you're around another person that's ticking or just doing, a lot of movements or sounds, it's very easy to pick it up. And it just kind of further, I feel like it's something that could probably further confuse people that don't really understand about Tourette syndrome or tic disorders, because there might be tics that people have that you say like, oh, well, what I tic is not what I'm thinking, or, anything related to
Right.
what's going on around me. But then at the same time, you could literally be ticking something that just happened around you.
Right.
And so confuses people because they're like, well, I thought you said that, your tics were not what you were thinking, or you not mocking me, or it's not on your mind, but here you are picking up something else. So definitely
Right. And
confusing.
I think that confuses a lot of people. And I think what's hard for people to understand too, especially when you're not in this world, when you live in a body that you get to do whatever you want with all the time,
Mm-hmm.
um, it's not our true thoughts that we're sitting here thinking all the time, especially if it's like this mean thing that people say or
Right.
picked up on as mean, I should say. But if I'm around the situation where it can come up, then obviously it's going to make me think about it. Just
Of
like
course.
if I'm around, I'm trying to think of an example. Like maybe I yell kids, but I don't think about kids every time.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm around kids, that's going to trigger
Exactly.
my brain. It's not because I'm
Yes.
sitting there thinking about it, or sitting there thinking about these words all day or these phrases that
Mm-hmm.
might come out of my mouth. And it's such a tricky thing. And people are so quick to be like, but I thought you didn't say that. I thought you said that was this, blah, 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 blah. And I'm
Exactly.
like, all right, let's calm down.
Yeah. It's so, I just feel like, yeah, it's just one of those things that just makes the condition even more complex, because it's just like,
Yeah.
what? What in the world? I've been thinking about this more so recently, and I also post videos online to kind of advocate for
Hmm.
people with disabilities.
Wonderful videos, by the
Yeah,
way, people,
well,
everybody watching.
well, thank you. Same to you, obviously. But you know how the internet can be, right?
Oh, yeah.
You know how the internet can be sometimes. Sometimes it's great. Not gonna say
Right.
it's not,
It
but
led
just
us to each other.
sometimes. Exactly, exactly. But sometimes it's just people's comments and opinions and stuff that can
Hmm.
be rough. So I do sometimes find myself editing out not all my tics, but certain tics. Specifically, I have, well, as of right now, hopefully no more, but as of right now, I have two um, motor tics that I've picked up that have just stuck with me for months, that are um, like a result of imitating somebody else. However, the tics that I have look like I'm stimming, because a lot of people think, oh, it's the same thing, tics, stimming.
Yep.
It is
Yep.
not. They look like I'm stimming, and it is 100% because it was a stim. It's somebody else's stim, because I've
Oh,
worked so much within the
interesting.
autistic community. Yes, that
Yeah.
I see people stim. It goes over my head because so whatever. It's not really bothering.
Right.
But for some reason, my body's decided, that stim right there, yes, we're going to do that, but it's going to be a tick. So it just confuses people even more, because it
Right.
looks a lot more so intentional, or like I'm stimming, but I'm not. Like, people are like, are you sure you're not stimming? Are you sure that?
Right.
I'm very sure that this is a tick,
Right.
because it's the same like feeling that I have before the tick
Hmm.
happens, and then it's gone. It just somehow is the exact same movement of that person's tick, and the other one is the exact same movements of that person's ticks. So yeah,
Right.
it's very interesting.
And so I have a question for you, if you're able to explain the difference for people that
Hmm.
might be listening that don't know the difference between stimming and ticking. Do you have an easy way to explain that for people to understand?
Yeah, I mean, I think I do. Um, I feel like stimming. A lot of people think about stimming, and they just think that only people who are neurodivergent stim, or maybe are autistic or have ADHD. But any type of stimming is anything that we do or say or anything like that that is typically repetitive, but also in some way kind of either helps people cope with their emotions or soothes them. So, for example, think about when people are anxious. Some common stims that neurotypical people might do is like clicking their pen. It might be like
Yeah.
twirling with their hair, playing with their hair, bouncing their leg up and down. Um, And those, I guess, are typically seen as more like socially appropriate stims that people don't really think about as anything outside the norm. But it's not something that is completely involuntary. Like, it's something you have to do or that your body does to help you cope, but it's not necessarily involuntary. It's probably more so like subconscious. Like, you might not realize that you're doing it, or you might intentionally want to do it. With tics, it's not anything that is, I mean, maybe for smaller children it might be a little bit like subconscious, but it's not that I'm ticking because I'm trying to cope with an emotion or calm my body or anything like that. It just happens. It doesn't matter if I'm happy, it doesn't matter if I'm sad, it doesn't matter if I'm excited, it doesn't matter if I'm angry, it doesn't matter if I'm tired. Like, it just happens, and it has a different feeling than if you're sitting there intentionally bouncing your leg up and down or twirling your hair. I feel like a lot of the time, I mean, I think there are some similarities for sure, because I think about how when we're excited, we might start ticking more. But again, that is something that I feel is like more so like really, really involuntary. It's not something that I'm trying to do to help cope with emotions or anything like that. But
it's almost not even like, it's almost, to me, in like the stim is almost more like a true satisfying feeling.
Yeah, that too.
I have to satisfy my tic, but it's still not comfortable. It might make my brain happy for half a second, but like when I'm anxious and I have a fidget ring and I'm doing this, that comforts me. Like, it redirects me to comfort me. Where I'm anxious and I tic, I'm more uncomfortable.
Afterwards. Yeah. I think that would be a difference. And I mean, I'm not sure. There might be somebody who's autistic that says that for them stimming does feel kind of like uncontrollable, because you think of, this is kind of where some of the similarities are. I can think of the same way how a lot of society tries to make autistic people stop stimming, and that's really uncomfortable for them to stop doing, just like when we try to suppress our tics, it's really uncomfortable. And you just really can't, like, for a certain, you can only do it for so much time before it just busts out without your opinion, desire. It does not care. It's gonna happen. But I just feel like when you're around people, whether it's that tic and you just kind of start to notice and see and have like an eye for noticing, like, oh, that person, that's a tic, like in public, somebody you don't know. It's the same way that sometimes you're able to just recognize people doing something, like, oh, that's a stim. And because I have that eye, I know that when I do those two tics, it looks like the stim because it's an exact copy. That's the echopraxia. But I'm like, I just know, like, I can just see people already like, are you sure it's not? Oh, you look like you're stimming, or why are you mocking people? And this is really not that. It just has actually turned into two different tics that I have that's in my tic repertoire for the past 3, 4, 5 months. So just, again, this is another one of those weird things that I feel like can really confuse people that don't really understand much about Tourette syndrome, tic disorders, or just people who are neurodivergent in general.
Right. Yeah, there's so much complexities, and I think the more complex you get into it, the more they're like in a disbelief world, which is aggravating. But and like I've noticed too, like the more, if I ever happen to have like my more complex tics and I capture it and I do it, that's when I get more people that are like, oh, well, there's no way you do all of that without your control.
All
and
the
like,
comments on your
right,
video,
like you walk,
where your dog was helping you out.
Yeah. So many ugly ones, and I've deleted so many of them. I'm sure there's some on there that I've missed. But a lot of the more common ones now are that I'm apparently possessed by a demon, which is really interesting. So you might want to look into that yourself, because apparently it's demon possession and not but no, like the complexities of it and like the suppression and stuff, that made me think of something. I was having a conversation with somebody else the other day too at work. And this was a girl that it's really interesting and cool. We worked together 20 years ago, which is slightly upsetting to think about. But now we're working together again at the doggy daycare that I work at, which is like the best job in the world. And because I'm just in the vicinity of dogs, my tics are generally even keel. But, and I was talking to her about that. I was like, it's gotten a lot better here because I'm around dogs all the time.
That's
and they
awesome.
Yeah, they just have a natural therapeutic effect. But I was telling her, and I thought about doing a video on this too. Like, I wanted to do a longer one to try and like explain it better. But I was telling her, I was like, I have become so good at trying to appear normal for other people that people will never understand or realize just how much I tick around them without them even knowing.
Yeah.
Because I make it look like other things. Or I've gotten so good at, and I just realized that I started doing this like a year ago. I think I picked up on that I do this. I've gotten so good at, like, when you're talking with somebody and you're looking at each other, but then like they look away for a second or something
Yes, you
distracts
let
them
it
real
out.
quick. I let it out real quick and it's done before they come back. And then I try to suppress a little bit more. Or like if my neck tick comes out when I'm talking to them, I'm doing my whole like little thing. Like sometimes depending on who I'm talking to, if I really don't want to explain it, I'll just be like, oh my gosh, my neck today.
Yeah.
Because realistically, that's true. My neck probably does hurt from my neck ticks all night long.
Right.
But
Yeah.
and I was telling her, and this person, thankfully, she was really perceptive of it. And she because like the first thing she said, she's like, that has to be so exhausting to have to just sit there and think about that all day.
We love
And I'm like, it is. And I was like, but on the other end of it, what's weird and not scary, but like really weird to think about is how subconsciously I do it to make other people comfortable. And I think I told you, and I don't know if we talked about it on the last one or not, is that I didn't even realize for the longest time how much I do suppress subconsciously until I went to the Tourette conference.
Yes. Yeah.
Until I felt myself stopping it and then remembering that I could tick there. And it was such a weird feeling for me. Like I almost like that imposter syndrome for me almost came through. Because I'm like, man, I talk about all the time how I'm fine ticking in front of people because it's who I am. And I'm like, wow, there's a very big part of me that is not. And I never picked up on it. And now I do. Like now I mean, I still subconsciously suppress and I don't always know, but I think I pick up on it a lot more that I hide it. And sometimes I get a little mad at myself for doing it because I don't know, like I recorded a video today. I recorded a couple to post in the future because like at the same time, like in the one, I was talking about an upsetting thing that was said to me where I was told that I needed to like learn how to push it down and rise above my tics.
Okay.
And yeah, right?
Holding comment. Go ahead.
Right? And then because I was talking about how it was one of the more negative and kind of like gross things that have been said to me because it was coming from people that I thought cared about me, for one. And two, like in the video I was talking about, I'm like, it's not my responsibility to make you feel comfortable. And it's not my responsibility to like pretend like I'm okay for you. If me being not okay is uncomfortable for you, then that's something that you need to work on. Because I was going through, it was with everything, like I talked to you a little bit about it. I'm not going to get into super detail, but when I was going through that really hard time last year, like I was not okay. And for you to sit there knowing that I'm not okay and say that to me, push down my disability for you, like get out. The raging emotions that I had through my body at that moment in my life.
Right. I mean, and this is my thought on that, or just that in general. When people make comments that make it seem like it's just something that's sheer willpower to do, like, oh, you just have to try a little harder to not tick or do this, they're viewing it as like a habit.
Yes.
Okay. But even then, let's just say somebody has a habit of like biting their fingernails, because that used to be me as a child. I also used to bite the skin around my fingernails, but that's a different story. We're not going to talk about that. But yeah, so imagine somebody has not an issue, but a habit of like biting their nails often, all the time. Do you think that's going to convince somebody and really help somebody? You just need a little more sheer willpower to not do it.
Right. Like
do you
yeah,
not
let's
think
make
I've already thought about that?
right.
If it
Let's
was a
make them
habit.
feel worse, and that'll work.
Yeah, exactly. Like you just need to have more self-control.
Right.
I understand that's the main goal of what I want, is to be able to have the self-control to stop doing this, but that's not something that's going to help me. So
Right.
even then, even if you're viewing it as it's just a bad habit, that's still not gonna help the person. So like, why are you saying that?
Right.
I don't understand.
Yeah. No, they told me that I was bringing the morale of everybody around me down, and that's why I needed to do that. Yeah.
Of everybody.
I looked at them. Jhonelle, I have never been so rude to people in my life, I don't think. I looked at them and I said, "I'm sorry that my disability is a burden for you."
Oh, yes. That yeah.
Like, I was like, I get, like, that feeling in my chest. I mean, it's still
Mhm.
pretty recent, like it was last year, but,
Yeah.
it's one of those moments that I don't think I'll forget, and it's a moment that I lost respect for these 2 individuals because
Mhm.
I thought they had my best interest in mind. I thought they cared about me. I thought they listened to me when I talked
Right.
and taught people about Tourette syndrome, but they didn't, and I remember at one point too, I told him, I was like, "I don't have the privilege of shoving this down."
Exactly. That's not really an option for me.
Right,
Hence
like
involuntary.
right,
Hence uncontrollable. Like
right,
it's part
and
of
at
the
the time, I was
condition.
having tic attacks 3 to 4 times a week,
Oh wow.
so my emotions were just as flat as they could be. Like, I didn't have the energy to pretend to be okay,
Yeah.
and I do that all the time anyway, not necessarily, like, be okay emotionally, but tic-wise.
Right.
And
Yeah, exactly.
it's just so sad that it does feel like we have to so much try and make
Mhm.
other people comfortable when we're the ones going through so much discomfort.
Exactly. And like I mean, it's literally the same thing with me, like editing out those specific ticks when I can because I'm scared of what people are gonna think.
Right.
And it's not even like stimming is a bad thing. Like, even if it was
Right.
a stim, it's not like it's a bad thing. It's not. So
Right.
why am I sitting here self-conscious about those 2 ticks specifically? You know, or like even in in real life, like being around friends or something, like there's certain ticks that I try to suppress, even though there's others that I just let out because I'm like, well, that tick kind of seems a little like why? Like that it doesn't it's not needed. And again,
Mhm.
it's one of those things that when you kind of sit back and reflect, is it like an influence of just how society has kind of treated you over time that you kind of
Right.
start to build up a little bit of like internalized ableism that you kind of have to deal with and
Right,
like shut down,
yeah.
you know? And I just also part of, dealing with the condition. And I also do have to say, in my opinion, you were not bringing down the morale of the group of people. If anything, you were bringing it up because they were learning more about Tourette syndrome. They were learning about more about how to interact and live and coexist with people with disabilities, and that brought the morale up. So whatever they said was not true, but that's just my
Well,
opinion.
thank you. Like, it showed people more true, like, face value of what it
Mhm.
can do and how it can
Exactly.
be like that out of nowhere, how I can be, quote, unquote, "fine" for so long, and
Mhm.
then all of a sudden I'm not. Because I talk about that all the time, like, I can have a year. I can work
Yeah.
alongside you, I can be friends with you forever, and you can never really see it, and then one
Yeah.
day, you're around me that day where it's bad, and, like, if anything, that should have filled you with more empathy. Like, I think at one point too, I
Mhm.
even told him, I was like, "Shouldn't this be a red flag for you that you can tell?" Because they said, "I can tell that you're a completely different person." I'm like,
Yeah.
"Right, so can I. Do you think I enjoy
That's when you
this?"
say, "Are you okay? Is there anything we can do for you? Is there any way we can
Right,
support you?" Yeah.
right, and they've asked me in the past, like, "Well, if it happens, what do we do?" Not that.
Yeah, not that. For sure.
So, it's
That's
just it was crazy, and I was thinking about that today because I was making a video about it just because it's crazy to me that that was one of the worst things, in my opinion, that was said to me,
mhm.
and I think it was because it came from somebody that I thought
Right. Got
cared
it.
about me, at least on some level. Because, like, a stranger on the internet that's probably sitting in his or her mom's basement eating Cheetos and stuff,
With
I
crusty
can
fingers.
yeah, I can brush that off easier, but it's
Mhm.
when it's from somebody where it hits me in, like, my heart,
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I don't know. It just makes me think,
Yeah.
if Scott were to ever say anything like that to me, like, I would look at him completely differently for the rest of our
Mhm.
he would never,
Right. He wouldn't.
but
He's wonderful.
right, he's too good. He's too good for me, but,
Yeah.
um, I don't know. It was an instant disrespect. Like, I'm like, all right, well, I'm just done.
Yeah.
I will be cordial, and that is it until I don't have to be around you anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think, for genuine people, right? They're kind of afraid to make a mistake like that around people with tic disorders, saying the wrong thing, doing the wrong thing, etc. But I feel like if you have concern, like if you might be curious and like, is it okay to ask this question or, anything
Right.
like that? Trust me, you're probably in a much better place
Yeah.
than these people were. These people were in a place that they did not really care.
No.
And especially with what we're talking about, how some things about tics are so weird. There's so many things that are kind of opposite, like how tics wax and wane, or how, it's not what I'm thinking, but this situational thing made me do this tic and stuff like that. I could see where people have questions and want to know more
Right.
and want to educate themselves and stuff, and that's fine. I don't think that's not really the same as telling somebody that they're bringing the morale down of
Right.
the people
No.
you're around. So if you
Because
are, like a parent or a friend or supportive person of somebody with tic disorder and you're concerned, like, I don't want that to be my situation, your concern is a good thing because it shows that you actually care.
right.
So,
Yeah, and
yeah,
I
for
love
sure.
when people ask questions because it
Yeah,
does
me
tell me
too.
that they wanna learn more.
Exactly.
And it is funny because, like you said, for me, it's the same way, like, people will get nervous, um, like, "Well, I wanna ask a question," and I can kinda tell them, like,
Mhm.
Just ask. Like, it's
Yeah.
fine. Like, I love talking
Yeah.
about this. You asking makes me so happy because you're wanting to understand. I love
Mhm.
nothing more than when a new person, like, especially if I'm just sitting there talking, an old coworker of mine, him and I came to be close friends because we sat next to each other all the time, and one time we got on the topic of it. Like, my shift was
Mhm.
over, and I sat there and talked to him about it for 30 minutes,
Of course.
and, but he was asking genuine questions, and he was really listening, and that means a lot to me, and I'm not going to not take an opportunity to teach somebody else, especially
Yeah.
when it's somebody that truly wants to learn about it and not just, you know, whisper about me later.
Mhm.
Um, and this wasn't that. And I'm very thankful that I had this coworker during my time at my old job because like I said, him and I got close and we talked about it a lot. And he genuinely would ask me, like, "So what do I do, like, if you have a tic attack next to me? Like, is there something that I
Mhm.
can do for you?"
That's
Because he
nice.
saw that I was having a hard time the one day I was ticking really bad in a meeting, and he hung back, and he asked me if I was okay, and that's when he asked, he's like, "Is there something that I can do when that
Mm,
happens?" And I'm
I
like,
love
"Ugh,
that. Yeah.
you're so nice, but
Yeah.
unfortunately, no."
Mhm.
But, I mean, I told him, I'm like, "If I go into a tic attack," and I always tell people, I'm like, "You're gonna know, just so you
Right.
know. You will know." And
Yeah,
because the people I
it's
work
a
with
little
now
different.
yeah, the people I work with now have asked, and it's really nice because everybody I work with now has had some kind of connection to somebody with Tourette syndrome, which has never happened to me before,
Yeah.
especially because it's like a small business. I'm like, "What is this life that is happening?"
Mhm. Yeah,
But they were
exactly.
asking, and my manager was asking, she was like, "So what do we like, if you have something," she's like, "I just wanna react the right way." I was like, "Realistically," I was like, "I tend to know what I need to do." Like, I'll probably get up and excuse myself whether I go into the restroom or if I go outside for a minute. I was like, "If
Mhm.
it seems like I'm not breathing or something, I might need you to, like, get me there." Like, be like, "All right, Brittany, you need to go outside," or, like, I
Yeah.
might need you to remind me to breathe, if as silly as it sounds, but because sometimes I almost need, like, knocked out, like, of the trance kinda, sort of.
Mhm. Yeah.
And, so but I told him, I was like, "You don't have to necessarily." I was like, "You'll probably be concerned if it happens here because it doesn't always look not concerning."
Exactly.
And a lot of times I don't breathe. So, but it was just nice to know, like, to hear them say, like, "What do I need to do if that happens? Like, how should we react?"
Yeah. Like,
And
they wanna
that was
be
really nice.
educated and, like, prepared to help you out and support you
Right.
as it should be.
Right.
You were you were talking about, just kinda like how your tics kinda increased and you had, like, a lot more tic attacks when you're in a more stressed state, and it made me think about, like, I would probably add that to the list. Like, that's another weird thing of how much our tics fluctuate. Like, I've told you before that there was a I don't know, maybe, like, 2 or so years of my life where I barely had any tics, like minimal 5 or 6 times a day, and that's
Oh,
it.
wow.
And I'm like, this is wild. Like, to think that that was a thing where I'm like, oh, everything's Gucci, everything's cool. I'm actually doing real good. I don't know what I was doing. Like, if people are gonna
Right.
come in and say, all their theories, there was nothing. That was not what I was doing to make them quote unquote go away. They didn't. They were just in this really long waning period, and I was doing, I guess, better. Or if I did have tics and I didn't realize it, they were just really subtle. But then, of course, with the stress of the pandemic, it came back
Mhm.
more so full force, where it's like hundreds of times a day on really bad days, to like not as much hundreds of times a day on good days. Um, so I was like, well, it's just weird to think that your body can do that, because like if my body could do that then,
Right.
why can my body do that now?
Right, like, what did I do then that I can repeat
Yeah.
so they slow down again?
Exactly. Just any waning period where you're like, this is interesting. But it also feels kind of, I don't know about you. Like, if you're in like a waning period where you're not taking a bunch, it's relieving where you're like, oh, this is nice. Like, cool.
Yeah.
But there's also this underlying like anxiety behind it, because you're just
Mhm.
like, this is weird. Like, this feels weird.
Right.
And I know that when they come back, they're coming back with the force.
Right.
So, yeah,
It's almost like what's brewing? What eye of what
exactly.
storm am I in right now that's
Exactly.
gonna release at any moment? And mine definitely got worse after COVID too. It was just like all
Hmm.
of the anxiousness and fear and everything else, it just stuck with me. But
Yeah.
I think what's interesting too is I think that I just got so used, because I worked from home for so long,
Hmm.
I got so used to being able to tick freely
Yeah.
that I didn't have to subconsciously suppress as much, and I think my body just got used to being able to let it out, that it wasn't necessarily that my tics were, and I don't know, I'm just guessing, because
Hmm.
I don't understand what my body does either, so it's really interesting to me that people online can tell me better than I can when I live with it. But, I'm wondering if it wasn't necessarily even that they weren't better then, it was just that I was in such a constant state of subconscious suppression,
Yeah.
and I
It's
got
like
out of that by
chronic.
being. Yeah, and I was able to do that, and now my body's just like, "No, we're not going back to that,"
Yeah.
and it's just, I don't know. It's frustrating, but at the same time, I don't know, it weirdly makes me, I think this goes back to imposter syndrome, it almost weirdly makes me feel more valid, which is
Mhm.
odd because I'm the first one to tell everybody, "It doesn't matter how much you tick, you're completely valid." But
Mhm.
it's so much easier to give motivation and nice things to somebody else than to
Yeah,
myself.
exactly. Yeah. It
So,
always is.
yeah. Yeah, because all the time I always think like, "Well, who am I?" Especially when I first started doing videos and stuff years ago, and I'm like, "Who am I to say anything about this when mine aren't nearly as bad as somebody else's?"
Mhm.
And I was, like, undervalidating my own struggle that I go through,
Right.
because, and it's weird because, like, I hate the phrase where people say that it could be so much worse. I made a video about it.
Mhm.
Don't say that to people, because that
Exactly.
undermines what they go through, and here I
Yeah.
am doing it to myself, like, every other day. But yet,
That's
if
okay.
somebody does it to me, I'm like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, here, guy. Wait a minute."
Yeah.
But I'm
It's
allowed to talk to myself that way every day, apparently, when I don't like it.
yeah, no, I feel like it's one of those things where, I mean, of course, yeah, there's varying levels of, how people have and Tourette syndrome, how many tics they have, how, you know, um I guess, strong the urges are to tick, there's several things, co-occurring conditions, all of that. It's kind of like a big spectrum. People get a
Yep.
whole but kind of mixed bag of Skittles on how that'll turn out. But it doesn't mean that, because if you can say that for anything, like, well, it could be worse, like,
Right.
but it's still whatever you went through, whatever you're dealing with, still is valid. And I feel like sometimes because my tics are more mild to moderate versus like moderate to severe or anything like that, I also feel that way. But then there are times where it's like, oh, I'm really having trouble with, I don't know, anything. Like, I'm having a lot of tics and I'm trying to cut vegetables to cook food to eat or,
Yeah.
anything. And then it's like, not my disability disabling me.
Right.
Oh my God. Like the thought of that, it is like, hello.
Right.
That's why
Not
it's
the
called
reason
that.
it's called a disability.
Exactly. That's the reason why. Like I am happy that I am, have the ability to drive, but there are times where I have had
Yeah.
tic tacs in the car where I'm like, ooh. Thankfully, one of them was like in standstill of like a whole bunch of traffic, so I wasn't really moving. But still, it was really scary, So it's like, oh my gosh, this is happening. But then again, there's that little part of my brain that's like, that's why it's called a disability, 'cause it's uncontrollable, including when you're having tic attacks.
Right.
um, and yeah, it's not something that's going to be static and constant. It's one of those things that I consider like a dynamic disability where
Yeah.
there are ups and downs to it. So that means there might be great times where I am able to sit and use a knife to chop something and I don't really worry about my tics. And there's other times where it's like, nope, we're not going to do that. We're going to pull out, some other type of a device to help me out. And that's okay. Like, I don't know. Like, it's just, it kind of also makes me think of when you're doing good and then people say something about it, like,
Ugh.
oh, well, you're not ticking or you haven't really. And then with the imposter syndrome thing, it makes you feel even more like it makes you feel worse because, well, now you've mentioned it now, that's on my mind. So now I'm starting to tick, but they're probably going to think, oh, no, she's just
Oh my
doing it for
gosh.
a show because I just mentioned it. She wasn't doing it before.
Yep.
And oh my gosh,
You
it
just
drives me nuts.
explained the thoughts that go through my mind
Mhm.
perfectly, 110%. Like I do,
Yeah,
because I'm like, well, now they're gonna think I'm doing this on purpose. But if I stop, what do I then?
exactly.
I'm going against everything that I preach. Like, don't trust, don't stop, don't ask me to stop. I'm
Exactly.
like, what's happening in my head?
Yeah.
And oh, and I just think that's also why it's so important for these kind of conversations, because I feel like when I tell other people, like, you can kind of see, like, their eyes widen a little bit and they understand on, like, a surface level.
Yeah.
But, like, you literally just said, like, a whole thought process I have had,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
to a T that I've had
Exactly.
because my
It's like
tics
an
got worse.
internal struggle you get afterwards. Like,
Yeah.
do I keep ticking now that I'm triggered? Or,
Right. Do I
you
go
just
to the
think.
bathroom to let myself tick real
Exactly.
quick?
Yeah.
And
It's
that's what I,
so
like, try to
weird.
tell people too is, like, you guys don't realize, like, I might like, at old jobs and stuff, like, I'm like, "You guys don't realize, like, I went to the bathroom more, not because I had to pee all the time, but I
Mhm.
would go so I could get a, like, tick release real quick, or
Right.
so I could go sit in a quiet area to
Mhm.
compose myself all over again, or
Yeah.
I went outside and I cried on the phone to my mom or my husband real quick to get it
Yeah.
out, and then I came back, and
Yeah.
that happened
Or there's a
a
reason that I
lot.
stand in the back of a group.
Yes.
Like so many simple
Right.
things that we don't realize we change up in our life or modify in our life that people just think, oh, that's where they're choosing to stand. There's a reason that I'm
Right.
choosing to stand in the back because everybody's
Right,
looking
or
at the
stand in
front.
general, because like, when I can
Yeah.
stand and I can kind of, like, almost sway a little bit, it's almost like I guess maybe that would kinda sort of be a stim for me because
Mhm.
moving my body at least a little bit, I almost feel like it kinda keeps me as an even keel for the most part,
Yeah.
depending on the
Yeah.
day.
I feel
So
that
if
as well.
yeah, if I can do that and move, like, that's why I was always thankful at my old job, like, we did have the standing desks, however, my foot kicking tics would definitely get in the way. When I was talking to my hairdresser earlier today about it, I showed her the bottom. I was like, "You see how I was like, "You see the bottom of my shoes?" I was like, "You see how on
Yeah.
both of the sides
It's
it's
like more
worn down?"
deteriorated. Yeah.
I was like, "That's from my ticks." Like, if you saw my work shoes that I used to wear at my old job, like, they
Mhm.
were so worn on the bottom, like, water would start to come in on them, and that's
Oh,
because
wow.
I scraped so much. And
Mhm.
I mean, they weren't obviously, like, high quality shoes either, but still, it's because I scraped the bottom of my shoe so much. I remember I didn't even realize it until one day I sat down to put them on and it, like, flipped it over or something. I'm like,
Yeah.
"Wow.
Yeah.
Wow."
Like modifications
Yeah.
to our environment or even ourselves. Like I feel like I've known people that have said certain parts of their body have changed, like literally have changed because of the ticks that they have.
Yeah.
So it I
Like, I
mean,
sit differently
mhm.
sometimes. Like, when my back tick was really bad last year, I almost never I just didn't sit back. Like, I would
Yeah.
sit
That's
when I
exhausting.
drove so far up and, like, had so much pressure. because if I sat back and like I'm fighting against doing it now, I would have
okay.
to I would have to do my back like that, but more forceful. And obviously when you're driving a car, that's not what I want to do. And most of the time I'm fine driving. And like you said, the complexity is that some people with Tourette syndrome, they don't drive at all because their tics are so severe.
Right.
I 99% of the time maybe 98 can drive just fine. But what played into that part for me last year too is what I was losing that independent ability.
Right.
I didn't feel comfortable driving. I didn't feel safe driving. And that's not worth it to me. It's not worth hurting myself and especially somebody else. And so, and now mind you, Scott drives pretty much all the time for us anyway, just because he prefers to drive and I prefer to nap in the car. When I'm not driving.
Perks of marriage.
Right. I have a thing in his car. We have to put it back. He just got a new lease or whatever, and I'm pretty sure it's for kids. And this is kind of a sidebar, but
that's fine.
And I don't fall asleep as much anymore ever since I got like my Lyme disease stuff under control and the fatigue from that. But when we dated, I didn't have this at the time, but when we were just dating, we lived 2 minutes apart. Maybe no.
Oh, that's cool.
5 to 10-ish minutes, depending on when if you got stuck on a light, slow drive or whatever. More like 5 minutes though.
Okay.
I would fall asleep when he brought me home from his house.
Gosh.
It was so bad. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And so I used to always fall asleep too, like when we come home from Cavs games or from Cleveland, because we live an hour outside of Cleveland. And so I saw this thing. It was an ad, and his brother and my sister-in-law got it for me. Like I said, I'm pretty sure it's for kids. It connects to the headrest, and it has these 2 things that like come down. So like
to like hold your head in place.
Yeah. So when you're doing like this, you don't do that anymore. You have a little rest.
That's so cute.
And so they got it for me, and I love it. It's one of my favorite things because when I am tired, I'll lean the seat back. And then I pull those down, and I just like
that is. I feel like that could be for kids, but that could be for anybody. Like that would be perfect for whoever, of course, is not driving on like a road trip or something. So
right. Well, I also have because of my mom doing this, so it's really funny to me that like so many people know that I'm a sleepy person, especially in the car, because my mom also got me a heated blanket for the car. It plugs into the lighter. And that was a game changer, especially when I was so like just a chronically sleepy person. I have that seat lean back and a heated blanket on me. I'm like, this is it was like I was a baby that he could drive around and get me to nap like a baby.
Yeah.
Like when I wasn't sleeping well, I'm pretty sure every once in a while I made a joke to him like, let's just like go for a ride. So nap maybe.
He probably knew too. He's like, all right.
Yeah. And so I always felt bad because longer trips I would be out and I would try so hard. I would try so hard to stay awake and I just couldn't do it. Yeah. And now it only happens every once in a while. And what's funny is like, that's how I could tell that I was getting better is because I was able to stay awake on 5-minute car rides. I could tell that.
That's okay. Again, not your disability disabling you.
Right.
No. Yeah. That makes sense. And I mean, of course, again, you have somebody that was willing to do that for you, which is really awesome.
Yeah.
And like, again, perks of like marriage life or.
Yeah. A good marriage life too.
Yeah. Maybe not just married life, but people.
I was talking about it the other day where like, cause a lot of people like they take opportunities to say negative things like complain about their spouses and stuff like that. And I forget what I was saying. And I sat there and I said, honestly, I was like, I really can't complain.
I'm curious. I wonder are the majority of people with tics night owls? Or is it just me? Like, I feel like it would be hard to be a morning person when you have issues going to sleep because of your tics. You know what I'm saying? So I'm like, I wonder if people are more so like night owls. But I mean, who knows? It could still be a good mix.
Right. I'm kind of in between, but mostly because even though I'm out of the more severe part of my fatigue, I'm a sleepy person. Like, I mean, and because sometimes I'll message you and you'd be like, what are you doing awake?
Yeah, exactly. 2:00 in the morning. This is
Right.
nighttime. I'm the night owl. What are you doing?
Yeah. So I bet it kind of I bet there's something there, because I always wonder too if sleeping badly, because this kind of goes back to people wondering if I tic in my sleep, and I don't know. I'm sure there might be some that sneak through. Some people have told me no, I know for sure. Like, I've seen my son tic in their sleep, blah, 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 which is really interesting. And I'm glad people tell me that, so I can know and say, like, well, some people do. They've told me. But I always wonder if sleeping problems in general are common in the Tourette world too. And I don't know if that would be because we tic in our sleep, because like I don't wake up as often now. And so that's what also leads me to believe, because before, when I was waking up constantly, I did start to wonder, I'm like, am I ticking and I'm waking myself up? And I just don't know because I'm asleep.
Yeah.
And so by the time I'm up, I'm up. But I'm very curious to know, like, if a lot of other people with Tourette syndrome struggle not even just getting to sleep, because I can fall asleep fine. Now my tics get worse in bed right before I go to sleep, because it's everything.
Why you intentionally try to go to sleep earlier.
Yeah. So everything comes out throughout the day, and I have to take stuff that helps me sleep. But I'd be curious to see if that's a more common issue amongst, or if it could also just be like a neurodivergent thing as well, because our brains just never stop.
They really don't. Like, I think about all the things that I think about. It sounds weird, but really, like, things are just always going on in my mind.
Right.
And then
I always think about when we were at the conference, because it was so funny to me when we were all down in the main area the last night and hanging out.
Yes,
which was
in like the restaurant area of the
which
hotel.
was like one of the best nights of my life.
Same,
I kept
dude,
just sitting
honestly.
there thinking, looking at everybody like, oh my God, my
Yeah,
people.
exactly.
But where you sat in front of Scott and you're like, so, like, just what's it like? Like, you just don't have anything?
I know. I remember that.
Oh, it was so funny to me. And he thought it was funny too, like, but it was cracking me up. Because, like, what was funny is because before we got there, I kept telling him, like, you're the weird one, not us. Like, you're the one that's weird here.
Yeah, like, why aren't you moving or saying anything?
Right. Do you find yourself, and I think it's also because I follow a lot of other Tourette creators and content creators and advocates, but do you find yourself sometimes when you're watching a video of somebody that doesn't have it, you're sitting there expecting them to tic, and you almost, like, every once in a while, I almost get confused. I'm like, what? Why aren't you? I'm like, oh, wait, you don't have Tourette syndrome.
Yeah. I feel like that's happened to me once, but it was somebody that I met at the Tourette conference, but she was there working, doing like video project stuff. She wasn't actually somebody there, like attendant of the conference. And I saw her somewhere else, and I was waiting. I was not waiting for her, because that sounds weird,
Right.
but I was expecting, after a while, watching her stream. She streams. I was like, why is she not ticking? Like, this is interesting. Which is really also a really funny thing to say, because there's moments where I am not ticking for a long time either. So,
Right.
Until somebody mentions it, and then I'm like, well, here we
Right.
go. But yeah, no, I definitely found myself doing that occasionally, or if I think more so it's like if I see people make a certain movement and I'm like, was that a tick? Like, my brain is like, was that a tick? Do they do that in other videos? It's kind of more so that, just because, like I said, after a while, you've been around it, you've seen a lot of ticks, whether it's your own or other people's or whatever, that you just get really good at having like a radar for ticks or any other type of involuntary movement type of stuff. So
I think that's very true, and I think the people in my life are better aware of it too. Because sometimes my mom or my husband or somebody will be like, "Did you see that person? I think that person might have tics, or I think that person might have Tourette syndrome. Did you see it?" And I want to see, and that's like what is odd too, because like, if I think they have it, like, I want to say something because I want to bond over it,
right.
but I also
They
like
could be
want
like, no, I don't.
Yeah, one, if they don't have it, or two, if they're like super self-conscious about it, I don't want to make them feel bad and seem like a freak. Like, oh my God, do you have Tourette's? I do too. Let's become best friends right now.
Yeah, and they're like, I don't know who you are. Please stop.
I'm just trying to grocery shop. Please leave me alone.
You never know. Like, that happened to me when I was in the store with a couple of my friends. We were picking some stuff up before like our trip, and there was this guy that I knew because of my eyes and my ears. He was clearly ticking. This was not anything subtle. It was very clear that he was ticking. He was on the phone talking to somebody, and he was ticking. He was like throwing his head back. He was making a grunting noise. He was jerking his neck, like very distinct, tics. And I was literally in the aisle with one of my friends as he was grabbing stuff and passing. And I was like, "Oh, did you see? Like, I think that guy has like a tic disorder too." And she was like, "Oh no!" Like she's completely oblivious to it. But I was like, "It's so obvious." And I saw him again in another aisle, and just kind of like smiled and waved because again he was on the phone. But I don't know. There's just that little like sense of connection that you have that you want to be like, "Hey, like I see you." And then it also sometimes, that might cause you to tick and like trigger your tics, and then you're hoping like, well, I really do hope that they have Tourette syndrome, and maybe they'll figure out that I do too. Otherwise, they're gonna think that I'm mocking them or something.
Right.
Yeah, that's the thought process I've had as well. But yeah, they didn't at that time. They did not have the eye for it, I guess, or anything. But I was like, I heard him from like an aisle over. Like I was like, oh, it sounds like a tick. Like it was very distinct to me. She's like, I just thought he was on the phone, or I just thought he was clearing his throat. And I'm like, people, I gotta teach you better, because it's just there's just something about it that's different. Like, I guess it takes time. I even like have a clapping tic where I clap like in front of my face like this, or sometimes in front of my ear, which is super annoying because it's my ear and it's loud.
Right.
And my friend thought I was like actually clapping for something. It's okay, strangers might think you're actually clapping, and then you just kind of play off like, no. She thought I was actually clapping. I was like, do you think I actually clap like that? Like if I do clap, do you think I actually clap like this? Like I don't. I feel like usually when you clap, your hands are a little more off center from like the fingertips,
right?
But I was like, no, I was like, and I think also like my elbows were up too, so I was like, yeah, no, that was definitely not a true genuine clap. Because then she started clapping. She thought I was clapping at something, so then she joined like, oh yay, and I was like, I don't know. She wasn't doing it to like try to make me feel better. She just legit thought I was actually clapping.
She thought she was missing something that she was supposed to be clapping.
Exactly. I was like, no, that was not a genuine clap.
Oh, that's
but
really
no,
funny.
I definitely have friends that have picked up more so on my tics and stuff.
Yeah.
Especially like I was telling you where I was talking to my friend who was kind of going through a hard time, and she'd made a motion with her arms, and then I ticked the same way. And then I was like, oh, she's like, that's okay. I figured that was a tic. So yeah.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed our conversation as always.
Me too. Yeah.
And
every time.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see where else we go with this podcast, whether it's talking about certain topics, or having guests on, because we definitely plan to do that as well. If people here have any ideas for topics to talk about, or any requests to be a guest on the podcast, you can email tourettespodcast@gmail.com. I feel like that might be a good starting place. Yeah. So
and if you have questions too for Jhonelle and I that you want us to talk about and answer to the best of our abilities, I will say. We have lived experience. We're not doctors. We can't treat you. We can't diagnose you with Tourette syndrome. But we do plan on every once in a while kind of doing a grab bag from the mailbox episodes in a sense. So definitely send those over. And if you want to be a guest, just like Jhonelle said, send us an email. We look forward to having all of our guests in the future and seeing where this goes.
Yeah, I'm so excited. And I hope that you guys are excited as well. And we'll just be able to kind of embrace us as we move on with or not move on, but embrace us as we continue on with the season and the podcast.
Yes, and bear with us while we learn all of the things.
Pretty please.
Yes.
Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you have a great day.
Yes. Bye, everybody.
Bye.